أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. Verse number 20 of Surah Nisa. وإن أردتم استبدال زوج مكان زوج وآتيتم إحداهن قنطارا فلا تأخذوا منه شيئا أتأخذونه بهتانا وإثما مبينا. If you desire to take a wife in place of another, and you have given one of them a quintal of gold, do not take anything away from it. Would you take it by way of calumny and flagrant sin? If you remember, verse number 19 talked about the reluctance of husband towards the wife. And it said that فَإِن كَرِهْتُمُوهُنَّ فَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَيَجْعَلُ اللَّهُ فِيهِ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. You may dislike them, however, Allah may have placed in them great khair and good. And we mentioned what that means. However, in case a husband does not listen to this and would like to divorce the wife and take another wife, that's the meaning of istibdal. إن أردتم استبدال زوج مكان زوج, to replace one wife by another wife, to take a wife in place of another wife. Now, of course, it would have been possible to say if you want to remarry. However, because the previous verse was talking about reluctance towards wife, and this man doesn't want to be without wife, but wants to divorce this wife and marry another wife, which happens, it's not unlikely to happen in our society. However, this istibdal may have meant that, okay, if I don't like my wife and I have given her lots of gift, sadaq, mahr and other things, now I want to marry a new wife, I have to give the same to her, so I may take this from this previous wife and give it back, give it to the new one by actually pressurizing her, pressurizing the first wife, pressurizing her to take away what I have given her, and give it to the new wife. Now, of course, this is buhtanan wa ithman mubina. This is a clear, flagrant sin if you want to do that. If you have reluctance towards your wife, and this, of course, presupposes that divorce is in the hand of the husband. And if you have great reluctance and you do not want to live with her, you are not allowed to take back anything from her. And as the previous verse said, وَلَا تَعْضُلُوهُنَّ لِتَذْهَبُوا بِبَعْضِ مَا آتَيْتُمُوهُنَّ. Do not pressurize them. Do not put them under pressure so that they say, okay, I don't want anything. Take everything back and just release me. This is not permissible. Now, ataytum, you have given them, apparently means in general sense. That means in terms of mahr, in terms of gift, in terms of nafaqa, or whatever. You may have bought a house for her or for the nafaqa. You may have given lots of gift and gold to her. It is not permissible for you to take anything back. And of course, usually when they wanted to take something back, they would have put the wife under real pressure. That's, I do not divorce you unless, for example, you give me these things. And then the wife had no choice in those cases. So it may include mahr and dowry and include any property. And the verse is actually emphasizing وَآتَيْتُمْ إِحْدَاهُنَّ قِنْطَارًا. You have given them a qintar. Now, qintar is translated as quintal. It the commentators have given different meanings for qintar, and we have it in another verse, وَمِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ مَنْ إِنْ تَأْمَنْهُ بِقِنْطَارٍ يُؤَدِّهِ إِلَيْكَ. From among the people of the book are those who, if you entrust them with a qintar full of gold, they will give it back to you. And from among them there are those who, even if you give them 1 dinar, they don't give it back to you. Mentioning that it's not based on their religion, it's based on their honor, on their sharaf. Now, the term is used for large sum of money, gold or whatever, but the commentators have given different meanings for it. Some of them that I have just mentioned here. For example, qintar may be enough gold to fill a skin of a cow. Enough gold to fill the skin of a cow, that is qintar. Or qintar may be diyatul insan, blood money of a human being, which is of course 100 camels, or the equivalent in gold. This also has been given as another meaning of qintar, or 40,000 dinars, which is quite a big money, or other things, 100 man of gold. Man is 3 kilograms. Anyhow, the verse does not specify how much exactly, but if you have given them a huge sum of money, you are not allowed to get it back from them. Now, is it permissible to have such mahrs? I mean, such huge amount for the mahr and sadaq of a lady. Now, the verse doesn't say this is only about the mahr. You may have bought them houses, you may have bought them other things, and have given them a qintar, whether mahr or other than mahr. So it isn't actually something referring only to mahr. وَآتَيْتُمْ إِحْدَاهُنَّ قِنْطَارًا فَلَا تَأْخُذُوا مِنْهُ شَيْئًا. You are not allowed to take back anything, especially if by pressurizing her, تَذَرُوهَا كَالْمُعَلَّقَ, just leaving them suspended. You say, I do not divorce you until you give back all these to me, for example. The verse is addressing the some of the bad habits which existed among the Arabs at the time. I mean, we can infer from these verses that what type of practices were common among the Arabs of the time, and how women were pressurized, and how women were inferior to men in all these aspects. Now, the verse ends with a very dramatic and stern statement, فَلَا أَتَأْخُذُونَهُ بُهْتَانًا وَإِثْمًا مُبِينًا. Would you take it by way of calumny and flagrant sin? Now, buhtan here may mean that since this money belongs to the woman, you cannot say that it doesn't belong to her. You cannot say, okay, I have given all this, so I have to take some of it back. This is buhtan in a sense. This you do not accept, you do not admit the control of the woman over her property. This is buhtan, and this is great sin. It is a flagrant sin to do that. As I said, this shows that this was common among the Arabs before Islam, and the verse, by such a very strong statement, wants to put an end to it. Now, some others say about buhtanan wa ithman mubina. Of course, أَتَأْخُذُونَهُ بُهْتَانًا وَإِثْمًا مُبِينًا is of course, an interrogative, but it's a rhetorical question. Do you really want to take back what you have given them by calumny, by slandering that this money does not belong to her, and by committing a great sin? And what belongs to them, you say that it doesn't belong to them. Now, another meaning of أَتَأْخُذُونَهُ بُهْتَانًا وَإِثْمًا مُبِينًا is that sometimes, because it was not possible to take the money from the wife who was going to be divorced in ordinary ways, they slandered that they have committed indecencies. And by that, everyone said, okay, they do not deserve anything. Do you want really to do that to your wives? And also, buhtanan wa ithman mubina is interpretation of the opposite of honorable release. You should actually release them honorably. And if you do not do that, it's buhtanan wa ithman mubina. With regards to honorable release, we have 3 places in the Quran which this is emphasized, and this shows how important it is when it comes to divorce. Of course, divorce has its bitterness. However, despite the bitterness, despite the anger, despite the unpleasant situation, you have to keep your honor and the honor of the wife and behave honorably. Now, the first instance is in Surah Baqarah, verse 229, which we discussed, الطلاق مرتان فإمساكم بمعروف أو تسريح بإحسان. And then either an honorable retention, talaq could not be more than twice, then after the 3rd time, either an honorable retention or a kindly release. Or in verse 231 of the same surah, وَإِذَا طَلَّقْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ فَبَلَغْنَ أَجَلَهُنَّ فَأَمْسِكُوهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ سَرِّحُوهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ. The same thing. Then either retain them honorably or release them honorably. Although this right of talaq is given to man, because of course many different reasons that we have discussed before, but this doesn't mean that man has the right to wrong woman. Or in Surah Talaq, فَإِذَا بَلَغْنَ أَجَلَهُنَّ فَأَمْسِكُوهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ فَارِقُوهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ. When their appointed time comes after Iddah, either retain them honorably or separate from them honorably. Now, the following verse is just a follow-up of this verse. أَتَأْخُذُونَهُ بُهْتَانًا وَإِثْمًا مُبِينًا. Do you want to take it by the way of buhtan and flagrant sin? And then verse 21 says, وَكَيْفَ تَأْخُذُونَهُ وَقَدْ أَفْضَى بَعْضُكُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ وَأَخَذْنَ مِنْكُمْ مِيثَاقًا غَلِيظًا. This is a very thought-provoking verse actually here. How could you take it back when you have known each other or gone through the private zone of each other, and they have taken from you a solemn covenant? They have taken from you a solemn covenant. أَخَذْنَ مِنْكُمْ مِيثَاقًا غَلِيظًا. غَلِيظ is intensely strong covenant and oath. Now, أَفْضَى بَعْضُكُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ. أَفْضَى is from فَضَى. فَضَى is the space, open space. And if the here means that the space of woman, the space of man have been united. The atmosphere has become one. Of course, this is a very polite and indirect way of referring to sexual intercourse. Just like in all other places, the Quran never directly refers to sexual intercourse, uses different meanings. For example, دخلتم بهن, you entered the room. Entering the room is an indirect way of referring to sexual intercourse. Now here, أفضى بعضكم إلى بعض, although it may mean the sexual intercourse, but it is more than that. It means that your private lives have become united. You have become intimately together. أفضى بعضكم إلى بعض. And this, since بعضكم إلى بعض talks about both man and woman. And this is regardless of its sexual component, as many commentators have said. Even if there is no sexual intercourse, of course, when there is no sexual intercourse, it means that the half of the mahr is due to the wife. However, the most important thing here is that emotional feeling that man and woman have toward each other. It refers to intertwining of all affairs of wife and husband with each other, enter each other's private zone, and to have one, to be one soul in two bodies. أفضى بعضكم إلى بعض. Now here, وكيف تأخذونه وقد أفضى بعضكم إلى بعض is actually preaching the husband, reminding him of the relationship that he had with the wife that now he wants to divorce, and of course take another wife because he didn't like this wife. How you do that? And it softens the heart by saying that, remember the sweet times, the good times you had with each other. Remember how you married each other with love, with affection, and now you want to forget all that. وَكَيْفَ تَأْخُذُونَهُ وَقَدْ أَفْضَى بَعْضُكُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ وَأَخَذْنَ مِنْكُمْ مِيثَاقًا غَلِيظًا. And they have taken from you a solemn covenant. Sometimes when we read these verses, we say that it may not be just because it gives this right to the husband to do such things. But we have to remember that these verses are reprimanding the type of treatment that was common regarding women in the Arab Jahili society before Islam. And as I said, for wise reasons, the right of talaq has been given to one of the spouses, and that's man. But that doesn't mean that the wife is inferior, doesn't mean that the man could treat her any way he likes, and these verses are quite telling about that. Now, what is the solemn covenant? أَخَذْنَ مِنْكُمْ مِيثَاقًا غَلِيظًا. Solemn covenant may be the marriage contract, and marriage contract is actually a very solemn, a very serious commitment. And the commitment of man to treat his wife honorably, to pay for her expenses, to give her the mahr, and whatever is in this contract of marriage. Now, Al-Baydawi mentions here, وَأَخَذْنَ مِنْكُمْ مِيثَاقًا غَلِيظًا means أَحْدًا وَثِيقًا. Ahad is a contract, a very, very firm contract you have made. And what is this firm covenant? حَقُّ الصُّحْبَةِ وَالْمُمَازَجَةِ. It's the right of good company and the right of being together intimately. And also it may be what Allah says, as I said before, فَإِمْسَاكٌ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ تَصْرِيحٌ بِإِحْسَانٍ. That Allah has said that if you want to divorce, it should be with ihsan. And this is misaq and ghalidha, part of the misaq. And then he mentions this hadith from the Prophet that أَخَذْتُمُوهُمْ بِأَمَانَةِ اللَّهِ. You have married them with amanatullah. They are the amana of Allah in your house. They are the trust of Allah in your house. So you have to be careful about them. And Allama Tabatabai says that this mithaqan ghalidha, solemn covenant, is that relationship, intimate relationship and affection which is between wife and husband. Now, of course, the verse doesn't argue only the legal level of this relationship, but mixes it with human morality, common sense, and emotions. And this is, of course, very effective when one wants to talk to someone to convince them. This sort of preaching in good manner, forbidding evil, effective way of awakening the audience and to appeal to their heart and emotions is very important. And one can say, and mithaqan ghalidha, the strongest bond, the most intense affection, the highest degree of intimacy exists between wife and husband, not between parents and children, not between brothers and sisters. This type of intimacy exists only between wife and husband, and therefore it is appealed to here. وَكَيْفَ تَأْخُذُونَهُ وَقَدْ أَفْضَى بَعْضُكُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ وَأَخَذْنَ مِنْكُمْ مِيثَاقًا غَلِيظًا. Now, Qara'ati, may God protect him and give him shafa because he's a bit ill. He says that at a broader level, it can be inferred from the verse that during the times of hardship, bitterness, conflict, and failure, one should not forget the sweet times that they had enjoyed with each other, or the husband enjoyed with his wife. And this is not only about wife and husband, especially between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We may come to difficulties in life. We may come to times where we are really, really desperate, hopeless. And we should always remember we were a small particle. We were a sperm, that Allah made us like this. What past we had, drowning in a sense in the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now when some bitterness comes, we have to remember all those things. Now the following verse number 22, وَلَا تَنْكَحُوا مَا نَكَحَ آبَاؤُكُمْ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ إِلَّا مَا قَدْ سَلَفَ إِنَّهُ كَانَ فَاحِشَةً وَمَقْتًا وَسَاءَ سَبِيلًا. Do not marry any of the women whom your fathers had married, excluding what is already past. That is indeed an indecency, an outrage, and an evil course. Now this verse and the following two verses talk about who is permissible and who is not permissible to marry. The relationship in the society, the interaction of different genders, how it should be organized, and what is permissible to marry, in which cases it's permissible to marry, and in which cases it is not. Now, here the first thing which is said about impermissible marriage is one of the most abhorrent marriages which existed at the time of Arabs before Islam, in time of Jahiliyyah. Arabs before Islam, sometimes, it was not, of course, common among all, but in many cases where the names of people are mentioned, the sons married the wives of their fathers either after they passed away, or if the fathers divorced their wives and the wife was young, and the son married the wife after the father had divorced her. So this was something which even among the Arabs was a bit reprehensible. marrying the stepmother, of course, this is different from mother. Mother is a different matter, which is mentioned in the next verse. It talks about the stepmother. مَا نَكَحَ آبَاؤُكُمْ, what your fathers have married. Of course, apart from your mother. First of all, the stepmother is like mother. And it is very reprehensible to approach, even to think about such a thing. And it is intrusion into the private zone of the father as well, even after they have divorced the wife. And if it is after the demise of the father, it's even more reprehensible in the mind of people. This is, as I said, this is mentioned separately because of its reprehensibility, which is not as much as what it follows in the next verse about, for example, you cannot marry your aunts or nephews, nieces, or things like that. However, it says إِلَّا مَا قَدْ سَلَفْ, except what has passed. Now, إِلَّا مَا قَدْ سَلَفْ may have two meanings. One is that if you have already married before this injunction comes to the wife of your father, whether the father is living or not, you can continue living with her, which is a weak interpretation. إِلَّا مَا قَدْ سَلَفْ. Because in other cases, for example, when Islam restricted the polygamy, restricted the polygamy to 4, there were people who had converted to Islam, but they had 5 wives, 7 wives, something like that, and the Prophet ordered them to divorce what was extra than 4. Or some, when the ruling about impermissibility of marrying 2 sisters was revealed, the Prophet ordered that those who had 2 sisters should, in their marriage, should divorce 1. And this should be the same, that even if they had done this before, after the injunction has come, they have to divorce the wife, which is not permissible for them to have. But some commentators say that, no, it is talking about not from now on. What has passed can continue, because of course it may be very difficult for the wives, which have been now used to living with this with their stepson, to separate from them. But the more convincing interpretation is that about the rulings that may ensue. For example, you have married them, the exclusion should be interpreted as from the present to future. You should not think that now that you have divorced them, you should not feel bad about the past. You didn't know about it. It's fine. So it refers to marriages in the past which no longer exist, or due to the death of either both couples or due to divorce. And it's so it means do not worry for any such practice that you or your parents had in the past. Do not worry about it. We forgive it. It's all forgiven. Or it's maybe about the practical implications of it. For example, if a child has been born out of this wedlock, do we regard them as legitimate child or illegitimate? And the verses "Illa ma qad salaf" means that it doesn't matter. We regard them as legitimate because they were born before this ruling coming, and all the consequences like inheritance, lineage, and all these things are fine for what has passed. إِلَّا مَا قَدْ سَلَفَ. So إِلَّا مَا قَدْ سَلَفَ in this interpretation doesn't mean that you can continue with this marriage. It means that the consequences of it, whether the consequences with regards to punishment or the consequences with regards to inheritance, lineage, and other things, it's all fine. We do not regard them as unlawful about these consequences. Now, one other thing that remains and we have to talk about is the ending part of the verse. وَلَا تَنْكَهُ مَا نَكَهَ آبَاؤُكُمْ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ إِلَّا مَا قَدْ سَلَفَ إِنَّهُ كَانَ فَاحِشَةً وَمَقْتًا وَسَاءَ سَبِيلًا. These three qualities, descriptions: fahisha, indecency; maqt, outrage; and evil course. Inshallah, we'll discuss it in our next session. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.